Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Strategy Fabric podcast, where we talk about outcomes rather than technologies, the why as much as the how. I'm Daren Fulwell, your host for today's conversation, and today I'm joined by someone I met at an automation meetup in London and realised we had a common interest in network automation, not just in the tech, but as a catalyst for change. Campbell, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey Darren, thanks very much for having me. And yeah, Campbell Gregory, founder of CRG Technology, and yeah, as you said, met at the automation conference, and we've had a few discussions up to date. And I think realizing that there's a catalyst for change, in the way in which automation is done, we found many commonalities in how that's done. So looking forward to discussing with you and seeing where this goes.
So you've mentioned you've founded your own company basically to deliver this this different approach. Do you want to give us a little bit of an origin story there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry probably 5-6 years now. I think a lot of my time was spent in the reseller space and on the sales side, and seeing where the industry was going, how things were working. And late side of 2022, decided to found CRG Technology with the aim of differentiating ourselves, doing things slightly differently. I think the IT space and transformation space is enormous. And kind of what I boiled down to was there's an opportunity for me to kind of use my innovative thinking and forward thinking approach to be different and to differentiate. And I think what a better time to be starting a business now where we've got a clean slate to build, and with everything that's going on in the world, with regards to automation, AI, all of that kind of stuff, really exciting time to be building a technology business. And I think, with my background and where it's going, CRG, was founded on the principle of, being the best, but being super innovative, super transparent with our customers, and showing value, ideally from day one.
As great sales pitch, but I suppose the point with all of this is that you mentioned a couple of times that the timing is right as much as anything. I think we've been doing networking more or less the same way in terms of operations for decades, really, and it's time for a bit of original thinking, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think it's it's original thinking, and we spent the last 12 months really feeling the market out, seeing what's been going on. And I think a big part of my job and my role for the business is making sure we're going in the right direction. And sometimes I do question it, on the plane to Denver, to the automation conference. I sat next to someone, who was on the way to the supercomputing conference. And
wow,
I think there were 12,500 people attending supercomputing, and I think we had, 350 at the Network Automation Forum. And you kind of go, hang on, are we going in the right direction? But I think, for what we're doing in terms of being niche and bringing network automation to the forefront, there's no better time, in my opinion, than now. The timing is right. If we look at where the market's going, and it's also a market that, whilst it might not be the most exciting market for everyone, the network is a foundation that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And that's really interesting for us, because it gives us a solid foundation.
I always think of it as it doesn't matter what technologies a company uses, whether they're in the cloud, whether they're hybrid, whether they're on-prem, whether they don't deliver any service, they still consume it. And what's the one technology group that's needed to consume any other technology? It's the network, right?
Well, and I think that also brings an element of opportunity for us. So many businesses have gone into charging down the cloud route, and whilst cloud might seem easy and it might be relatively straightforward to be spinning up these networks, you can spin up a cloud environment, relatively painless. But when you start integrating that back into your traditional networking, and you start adding on layers of security and segmentation and commonality of tools across cloud and traditional infrastructure, you really start getting into the guts of how complex this can be for organizations. And I think that, again, is an opportunity for us, where some organizations, not necessarily by choice, they had to adopt cloud, for various reasons. And there's a point in the market now where they kind of looking back at traditional networking, and going, how do we stitch these two together? How do we make sure our teams are working across platforms, because a cloud networking team and a traditional networking team, in my opinion, should be the same team. It's the network, and where we put these assets and how we consume them, it should be a commodity. But right now, it's quite challenging to consume.
Yeah, it's far from it, right? And I think, and even with all the automation and everything, people need the guidance, I guess, to take them in the right direction. Now, we had a bit of a byline on the subject for this podcast of taking the network from naughty to nice. What makes a network naughty then, and how do we make it nice?
Well, I think we always know it's the network's fault, isn't it, Dan? I think
Well,
it always comes back. So, I think, going from naughty to nice, there's so many aspects that we could look at what makes a network naughty. And, it could be as simple as, availability, it could be any downtime disruptions to the business. It could be just inconsistency, I think, is a big challenge for some organizations. So I think one of the beauties we found is, networks are naughty because they are complex. They are ever evolving. That things are changing. So given half the chance, they are led astray. And I think one of the things of having a naughty network is it is one of those things where if you don't have visibility, if you don't have control, if you aren't putting the process and the people, and the structure around these networks, they can quite quickly sprawl. And then it becomes a real challenge for organizations to manage them. And I don't think anyone's ever gone and said, "Oh, I've got a nice network," because it's one of those things where no one really gets that opportunity to start greenfield and start from scratch and have the perfect network with a perfect team and perfect technology. So I think it's always ambitious.
It's almost like there are nice bits, right? Sometimes when you get the chance to refresh them. But they may only stay nice for so long because they get led astray by the rest of the network, right? So,
well, and that's the thing you mentioned, when you get a chance to refresh them, and I've seen, organizations get a chance to refresh the LAN, and they go and buy the most amazing Ferrari of a LAN campus environment, and then the wider network doesn't really live up to that standard. So it's the network as a whole, is challenging to wrap one's head around and see where it's going. But and you do have moments, if you're an infrastructure team and you get relatively blank check to go and buy a new portion of the network, you're really excited. But then it starts getting challenging to integrate that into the wider ecosystem.
And I guess it doesn't matter if you've got one bit that's fantastic and the rest that's a bit shonky. The symptoms of that are the same as if the whole lot was rubbish, right?
And that's the thing. End of the day, we can be the most advanced, we can be the most technical, we can have the most amazing, tool sets and complexity in the back end. If that user arrives at the office and has poor connectivity or poor experience, the network's rubbish. And this is the challenge, is really trying to simplify the network, make it consumable, make it easy. Because at the end of the day, we also live in a world where I've got 1 gig up, 1 gig down at home. It's a privilege to be living at this level of networking, and to go back into a corporate environment and not have the same experience. I think users now are far more empowered to say the network is not living up to expectations. So
I was going to say those expectations are high, aren't they? And given that the network has literally in a couple of decades has become foundational to all of the other technologies that we deploy, you've got that expectation is real and needs, we need to be delivering it. It's as simple as that, I suppose, isn't it? So what are the first steps? Obviously, if your network isn't what you need it to be, how do we go about making it that so?
So I think in my personal approach and kind of what I've seen and part of founding the business was, we need visibility. We need an easy way to kind of get a health check on the network, because the network is there to be consumed. It's a key piece of infrastructure, but at the end of the day, it doesn't quite attract the same budgets as cloud and cybersecurity and some of those other budget line items. So what we needed was a tool to be able to come in and run effortlessly in a customer's environment and give us an indication, or we talk about network assurance all the time.
Sure.
What is the network doing? Because it can be up 100% of the time, but is it delivering based on the business goals? Is it delivering as per the design? We can go into a whole long discussion, on its own based on design, delivered intent, and those kind of things. But what we needed was a quick and easy way to go into a customer's environment that we don't know and provide a health check. And I think that's where I spent a lot of time, on the sales side of things, working very closely, with engineering. I loved kind of getting under the hood of, it was 12 o'clock at night and guys were making firewall changes and stuff. And I was going, hang on, what's that? Or trying to, understand really what the engineers were doing on a day-to-day basis to make changes.
Yeah.
And I think what I twigged quite early on in my career was that customers aren't looking, in my opinion, for those very shiny, new tools. They want their network to be functioning. They want it to be secure, and they want it to be delivering for the business. And what we were able to do, using IP Fabric, was implemented in a customer's environment and have a full understanding, within a matter of days, of what was good, what was bad, how we can prioritize resource, what was uber critical. And I think the best thing was to do that manually. It was just too hard, and by the time we got around to it, I ended up with like screenshots of some random poor switch and a dodgy config, and you're going, by the time you've communicated that through the procurement channel, the head of infrastructure, whoever you're speaking to, it's gone full circle, and you've received a purchase order to remediate that, and this was probably changed.
So I was going to say, it takes so long. No, I mean, as a consultant before I was with IP Fabric, I spent many a month on a data center floor, or pulling cables through in a dusty old broom cupboard, whatever it was, in order to understand what an existing network looked like, never mind putting new stuff in. And as you say, it takes so long. By the time you get around to it, and actually publicize it, things will have changed and moved on. So that constant change, and it's not even intentional change a lot of the time, right? It's stuff happens, right? And you need to be able to sort of keep a grasp of that. So, and then I guess you need, as you go ahead and remediate and transform, you need to be able to track that and understand that and ensure it's consistent and so on.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, a big part of, the end goal, for us, is taking customers on this automation journey. And I think it's for us, it's key to break down what that looks like, because it's not somewhere you're going to get to quickly. I think we kind of come in there are quick wins. Yeah. But in terms of being able to walk into a customer's environment and say, we're going to automate this and make it all, perfect within 6 months, 12 months, it's not going to happen. So, I think what we've identified is that we can really bring that network assurance side of things and stability and simplicity through using tool sets and through proactive discussions and design-led discussions, and things like that. So what we were able to do is kind of lead with IP Fabric, instantly get a good health check, on the network. We can get diagrams, documentation, everything, in a very easy and straightforward and commercially reasonable, way that we can then, even without, as a business, throwing huge amounts of resource, at a company, or we can quite quickly make a decision where we can send reports to senior management and give them an idea of what a remediation plan looks like. And at the same time, we can be highlighting very low level issues in the network to engineering. So I think it's that ability. I guess you've got
a good breadth there, haven't you, of capability, because you're saying, right, to the network engineers, right, you've got a bunch of issues around, I don't know, configuration, state of interfaces or whatever, cabling problems, topology issues, whatever. But at a higher level, you're saying, look, now you've got a tool that is enabling your network teams to give you a higher level of information about the availability of the network, that functionality. you've already sort of pushed the needle to the right straight away, right? But then I suppose beyond that, it's changing the way that people actually continue that operation. So you mentioned already automation. Um, that becomes a big part of it, but not all of it, right? And that's the thing that we talked about before.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we've got the ability to come in, run IP Fabric, get a very good understanding of the network, and then over time we can also measure change and report on change, because also we don't want to be marking our own homework. I think we want to be partnering with a tool that, whilst we partner very closely with IP Fabric, it does give us, independence in terms of who is marking our homework, and we've got a common point of what does good look like. So immediately you run the report, you've got your green, amber, reds. As long as we're turning reds to ambers and ambers to green over a period of time, we can quite quickly show the impact we're having within the network. And I think that plays out really well in terms of longer, more strategic transformation programs. And I think, where I see the benefit, long term, is we are genuinely partnering with customers. We're not, in the sense, we're not selling IP Fabric as a product. We are using IP Fabric as a key tool set for CRG. And then if the customer likes it, which 9 times out of 10 they do, they go, do you mind leaving this here? Because it's been extremely helpful. And I think that's where we want to be leading with software with a service.
Yeah.
And the software piece is important, but that service piece to customers is even more important, because as you're saying, now we can go in there and, we can tell them how good the network is, but how we fix it and how we do all of that as part of our professional services engagement, how we use new features, how we forward planning 2-3 years in advance. We can go in and fix a spanning tree issue, in a week.
Yeah.
But in 12 months from now, 24 months from now, as a business, we can be positioning a whole redesign of the entire network. And I think that's important for us, is that we're seen as trusted advisors in that space.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because I think of it in like this knowledge pyramid thing, right? Of saying, well, look, you've got, it's great having the data to be able to sort of do the minutiae, right? To say that little thing needs fixing, that little thing needs fixing, or whatever. But then it's about building, extracting the information from that data, which gives you that bit more insight, but then really building knowledge about what the network is about and what you're doing with it, by bringing context from other places, by bringing the knowledge of and the experience of yourselves, coupled with the knowledge and experience of the folks at at the vendor, in order to actually deliver something that's far more valuable than just that raw data as well. I think that becomes an interesting part of the process, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to remain independent. It's important for us to be innovating. And I've had a customer come to me and say, "Oh, if only I had the budget to go and buy that vendor," because they really wanted to. But when it comes down to skills, and it comes down to rate of change, and it comes down to the people and the process we spoke about, it's not that easy to be doing that. So from our perspective, where we see kind of assurance and orchestration coming to life long term, is simplifying the network, getting the network back to a state in which, in my view, we're trying to leave customers better off and with tool sets to manage their own network, because I like sleeping at night.
Yeah. That's the key, though, isn't it? Because and I know people talk about this idea of simplifying the network, but in reality, a lot of the complexity that we have has to be there in order to deliver the kinds of services we want. We need cloud, therefore we need to make sure it's part of their network. We need to have flexibility around our WAN, so we need an SD-WAN solution. We need, so the complexity that's inherent in having these different networks and stitching them together is almost a necessity. But what we need is process and tooling and whatever it is, in order to be able to manage that complexity. And that's the trick, I think, here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, we're not shying away from complexity, because we're we love complexity where it's necessary, but I think I've seen customers where, the direction from the top is let's tag an endpoint on the edge and make sure that that translates all the way to the data center, and we can do all this amazing complex stuff. But fundamentally, the design doesn't allow for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that's where, in terms of simplicity, we want to take a step back, look at the entire network as a whole.
Yeah.
Look where customers have kind of consumed cloud. Look where customers have gone on their SD-WAN, now SASE. Now the whole evolution of what's been happening at these different layers is challenging, and not one single vendor's all got it right at the same time. So where you kind of back a vendor, they drop a key piece of that, and all of a sudden you've got another third party in the middle there, and that ambition to tag something at the edge and let it go all the way to the data center is gone, because that piece of technology sits in the middle. Not impossible, by any means, but
it's training someone else to know and understand that. It's getting the knowledge again and understanding how they stitch together and all of that, isn't it? It's as a network person, trying to maintain all of that in my head used to give me brain ache, because you just cognitive overload of having all of these different technologies, understanding how they're all stitched together and whatever in a relatively small environment. Even that is tough. So to be able to do it in some of the bigger enterprises, for example, that sounds horrendous.
It's extremely challenging, and I think that's where what we are trying to achieve with our customers is being extremely transparent. I think we want to just kind of let them know where it's going to hurt. Some of these transformations are possible, but you're going to have to go through some areas of change, and that might be people change, technology change, all these various aspects. But I think what we're seeing, and again for us in the market, the enterprise space is a great space to play in, because ultimately you've got the people and the budgets to deliver large transformation. I think when you start tearing down, enterprises to kind of more commercial mid-market sized customers, it's extremely challenging to stay on top of all of this, and stay on top of BAU, and stay on top of how you're going to see what's going on in your network. You've outsourced a portion of your network which you thought was a good idea. Now you've lost control and visibility, and quite quickly you can have that naughty network coming back in, and people are going, oh, I remember when I used to be able to jump on the firewall and implement change within a reasonable period of time. Now I'm waiting, for someone to acknowledge that. And, there's various aspects of how this all comes together. So, I think for us, it's getting back to basics. We like complexity where there is a need for complexity, but also what we like to do is take a step back and go, what are we trying to achieve? How are we going to do it? There's best of breed technology vendors, all over the place, some with better integrations than others. And I think what we want to try and do is let the customers take a breath, and not a dig at consultancies, but we've also seen, big non-technical consultancies come in and say, well, this is the way, go to cloud, go and do all these amazing things. But without understanding the underlying complexity of delivering that change, and easier said than done sometimes.
And I guess the context of the organization as well, right? In terms of what technologies they've had before, where what that transformation looks like, how you stay on top of that network during the transformation, whatever, you've got so many other aspects to sort of manage and deal with there.
Exactly. And I think, again, going back to what IP Fabric has allowed us to do through the approach with snapshotting, and the ability to kind of record change, manage change, visualize the change. I think also one of the greatest features, of IP Fabric is ultimately we're playing in a database. So a lot of these organizations and a lot of these other tools have right capability, and that becomes quite scary when you are testing and playing around with your network. You don't want to negatively impact your network. So what we've been able to do with the intent checks and things like that is ultimately really get into the guts of what the network is without inflicting any damage to the production network. And I think that also brings a huge level of confidence into engineering. And I think the most feedback I think we've gotten around our approach with IP Fabric is that we're we're adding almost another engineer into the mix without bringing a physical person in there. And we're almost augmenting skills. So someone who, again, in these smaller organizations doesn't have a whole team, behind them. They've got a long list of things to do. They've got BAU to keep up with. And what an amazing place to go and capture a point in time reference and see what it was last week, or see what it is today, and see what changed. And quite quickly, they see the value, because that would have to be, normally tap on the shoulder to another member of the team. Do you mind investigating this? And we had it the other day. There was something with a printer plugged in on one of the floors, and the guy phoned me up. He said, "I've just used this tool. It's amazing. I was able to restore what the config was last week based on all these things." And all of a sudden, it wasn't necessarily about the complexity of the change, because there's other ways to achieve that. It was just the simplicity that he could log onto the portal and get his job done faster. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is complement people, process, and all of that with the best of breed tools, with an API first approach, make life easier where we can, because why not? We live in a day and age where we can use these tools, we can do things faster. I'm learning my way around a Python SDK, but I think it's one of those things where, if I can do it nowadays, and having not been technical, we live in a world where we can introduce a lot of change relatively quickly, to complement the way people work. These tools aren't replacing people. They are making people's jobs faster, so they can have more strategic discussions about where we take the network in year 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of rounded that off quite nicely in terms of the explaining why automation is not a bad thing, right? It's not going to replace people's jobs. I think we've established that now. So anyone who thinks it is, think again. Because this called progress, right? I think that's something that we've been living with, certainly our generation for long enough. So listen, I could go on talking for hours. I've got so many other questions here that I'm thinking, we could do it. We could take this way further, but I'm conscious of time. So I'm gonna just ask you my final question, Campbell. What's Santa bringing you this year?
Normally I'm getting a lump of coal by this time, but I think it's no, I think from obviously IP Fabric and CRG are working extremely closely together, and one of the exciting things we've got is working towards Cisco Live, and we've got proof of concepts running with IP Fabric, where we can come in, install the tool, take you through the whole process. And I think for us as a business, we're hoping to spread some of that festive cheer by just enabling people to actually go on holiday, because we can go and see what's going on the network and capture the network. And you know what, if I go and run IP Fabric in a tool and it brings back all greens, then everyone's getting a pretty happy Christmas. So I think
that sounds like a great set of lights for the tree, right?
That's what we're bringing. So from our perspective, looking forward to the partnership, growing these solutions, and also just introducing people to the product. It can be quite overwhelming to run through some of these proof of concepts, but we're hopefully bringing a new way of innovating to our customers, to the market. And if anyone's got any questions, or even just wants to see any aspects of the platform, they must just give us a shout. We're open up until Christmas, so just in time.
Love it. Love the nice little plug there at the end. Awesome. I mean, all contact details and everything hopefully will be in the notes to accompany this anyway. So if anyone does want to speak to you, we'll pass them through. Listen, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. I'm really looking forward to catching up in the new year. I know you've got a bit of an extended break, hopefully over the festive season. So all the best for that, and all the best to your family. And have a great Christmas.
Thanks very much, Daren. Great speaking to you as always. And to everyone listening, have a great festive time. And we'll see you in the new year, and building up Cisco Live. Looking forward to that as well.
Awesome. Should be fun. Take
Cheers,
care.
Daren.